Thank you for coming to our storytelling and meditation event to celebrate the spring equinox. Today is, we're that much closer to the spring. And everybody knows that up here in the north, spring just starts a little later than everybody else's. And our spring equinox looks a little different from other places, even southern parts of the state. I've seen people posting photos of crocuses and small early spring flowers down there, in southern New Hampshire, whereas we just lost most of our snow this week. So we don't quite have that yet, but we're getting there. And to celebrate that turn to the longer time of the year, turn to the warmer time of the year, where things are going to start popping out of the ground, things are going to start finding their way from the underworld up. We're going to have a few stories to explore all of that. If you don't know me, my name is Isaac. I'm going to be the, MC for the evening. And welcome. I'm glad to see everybody here. To start off with, if you have not met Aditu Owls, she is a local shaman, artist, mischief maker extraordinaire. And she's going to be starting off by continuing a story that she started on our ebook meeting. So take it away, Aditu.
Okay, so actually I want to tell the story, but I also want to say a little bit before we get into that about what this time of the year is for me. So I'm one of those lucky people who was born on a threshold of the cycle. So my birthday was yesterday, the last day of winter, technically, the last degree of Pisces, the very ending of the entropy of winter, so to speak. And now we're moving into the work or the growth of what will be spring eventually. So, as Isaac so eloquently put it, we are in sort of the brown melted snow phase of our winter up here in mud, and the smell of compost, I think, is indicative to where we're at right now. And so for me, this emergence from the underworld is the emergence from that place of dreaming where we've been underneath in the thick of it, in the dark of it, in the heaviness of winter. Not necessarily heavy in a bad way, but heavy in the sense things move slower. There's not a whole lot of movement. So it tends to allow us to sort of sit and be in our introspect. And the story I'm going to talk about tonight, the part I'm going to finish tonight, is the story of Inanna. So I took you all down into the underworld where she met her sister, Ushkigal. This myth, actually, it's the oldest poem that we have record of, the story of Inanna. And she goes down into the underworld. She meets her sister. Her sister is not very happy with her, and basically strikes her down because, sisters, power, arguments, whatever. They just couldn't work it out. And so now Inanna is hanging for 3 days in this sort of suspended space. And that's a little like our Easter ceremony, like for those of who have a Catholic or a Christian upbringing. But Ushkigal is hanging there right now. She's hanging in this place in the in-between, the threshold, the doorway between light and dark, which is the time of year, the equinox, the time of light and shadow being of equal, the day being of equal parts, 12 and 12. So we're in this point, and it's a very brief point. It's a moment of reconciliation. It's a moment of change. It's a moment of decision making. This is the time of the year when plants decide to grow. And just like that, Inanna was down there underneath. She's waiting for a sign. She's waiting for an indication that she should grow. And that's what we're all waiting for. Waiting for the sun. We're waiting for that moment when we pierce the earth, when we open up from our dark winter dreaming, and we face the sun, and we feel its warmth, we feel its love, and we feel its connection. So So we're down there. We're down there in the underworld with Anana right now, and she's hanging. But before she went down, she had a friend, a confidant, a companion who said she would drum for her on the upper world for her. So she would drum and she would go out and she would drum to the gods and she would drum to the women and she would drum in all the temples and she would drum so that Anana would come back up. And she drummed and drummed till she found Anana's father, Enki's temple, and she explained what had happened and how Anana has been gone for several days now, 3 days, and she had not returned. And Enki turned to his shamans and basically said, "You must go down there. You must fetch my daughter." And he gave them the ability to shapeshift into flies so they could fly down through the gates and be unnoticed. And he also gave them a magic plant, a magic herb, something to give her medicine to bring her back to life. So the shamans transformed into flies and they flew through the 7 gates down, down, down into the underworld. And in the underworld, Erishkigal, who is Nana's sister, and was not feeling so good. So she said, "Oh, my heart," and the flies sort of mimicked her and said, "Oh, your heart." And then Erishkigal said, "Oh, my liver." Oh, and they said, "Oh, your liver." And they said, "We could give you medicine to make you better." And Erishkigal said, and so give me this medicine. And they said, "Oh, but we want a corpse." And she said, "A corpse?" And she said, "Yes, we want a corpse. We want that corpse." And Erishkigal said, "Oh, oh, my heart, oh, my liver, oh, my heart." She said, "Okay, fine, take the corpse." So the fly said, "Wonderful." So they unhooked her and took her down. And instead of giving the medicine to Erishkigal, they gave it to Inanna, and Inanna began to come back to life. And Erishkigal, seeing that she had been duped, became angry. And the flies and Inanna began to ascend the underworld. And Inanna began to take back her magical objects, her clothes, her jewelry, the crown, all of the things that she had brought down, that she had stripped herself of as she went down into the underworld. Because when we go into the dark places, we go alone. We go without our magical tools. We go there to face death. We go there to make that choice to rise back up again. So she comes up to the top of the underworld. And Rishkigal says, "If you survive going to the underworld and coming back up, you cannot have power in both places. So you must send somebody back down to take your place." And Inanna said, "Okay, all right, I will do that." So Inanna went out to the fields, wandered around, and then came to the great palace where her husband Dumuzi had been partying it down since she left, having a good time, drinking all the wine and eating all of the fancy fruits and canoodling with all of the nymphs and goddesses and just having a grand old time. And Inanna came up and she was rightfully pissed and sort of said, "You, to the underworld." And she banished him to the underworld, and the shamans grabbed him and took him down to the um, and that's why we have this exchange of energy, and that's why we have this contraction and expansion, and why they must always be in constant balance with each other. And that's kind of where we're at right now in the world, in this place of balance. If you think of the judgment card in the tarot, where the Lady Liberty or the Lady of Judgment or the Goddess of Judgment is balancing on the point of her sword. So everything we do right now is right now tonight is that place of balance. That's why they balance eggs today, because the energies are just like that. That point where we make the decision to live or die, make the decision to choose life over death, to overcome the darkness, to push forward to the light. And that's also what's happening right now in the world. As things begin to freeze and thaw, and they'll do that for a while, that breaks down all the nutrients of the plants, all the nutrients of last year's leaves, all the nutrients of last year's sunlight, and that's going down to swell the seeds so they get the message. They get the medicine from the plants, just like Enki's plant medicine was sent to the underworld. And then that will be ingested by the seed, and it will swell and it will begin to grow and it will begin to make its way back to the upper world, to the sun. But even though it makes its way to the sun, it has to make an agreement to send something back down. So it will live and it will produce seeds and it will die and it'll decompose, it'll decay, and it'll go back. And that's the essence of this time, this threshold time, this time between light and dark. It's like the dawn and the dusk of each day. So, um, so I think that's my story. So hope it's useful.
Great. Thank you, Adi. That's really wonderful. So, in this look at the underworld, our next storyteller is going to talk a little bit about the underworld and the process of coming from it into the light. Our friend Marty is a local entrepreneur, businesswoman, wonderful human being. And we've asked her to join us for her own story, talking about coming from the underworld to the light and going through a very spring-like experience. So once she wins the battle with her video.
There we go.
Fantastic. I'll let you take it away. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. I am going to talk a little bit about my own story because as soon as Josh asked me to take part in this, it brought me to a college course that I took. I got my bachelor's degree in my 40s, and I did it online through a college that recruits the best professors from everywhere to teach. And one of the courses that I took was the history of children's literature. And I took it as a elective. And I took it because I always had a real problem with fairy tales. And one of the real problems I had with fairy tales, like the Brothers Grimm, and I'll use them a lot just because they're so familiar to so many people, is that the forest and the woods were always a scary, scary, dark place, even above ground. If you think of Hansel and Gretel, if you think of the demons and the wizards and the negative parts of the spiritual world, they always, according to these fables and stories, resided in the woods. And people from boarding schools were banished to the woods as punishment. And it was always that the woods were a bad thing. And I wanted to understand why that was. And so I took this course. My first understanding of there being a world underground, a tangible underground place, was when I was about 3 years old and I discovered sap in maple trees. We had several large ones in our yard. And I realized that the sap came up through the tree and then out, but it had to come from somewhere because it certainly wasn't coming in at ground level. And that was when I started to understand the idea of roots and an underground system that supports all the life above us. I became further aware of it in a big forsythia bush that I hid in from a pig snake, and I got tangled up in it, and I was in trouble. And there was a snake on one side of me and nothing on the other. And I had to get myself out of that very dark place. And I did it by digging down underneath all the compost that Adi was talking about and finding a way out. So in my first decade, I heard about the Brothers Grimm. I heard about how terrible the woods were, but I realized that dark places underground may not be such a bad thing. Thus, by the end of my first decade, when I was 10, I had a little bit of light. My second decade, I learned how to swim in a brook. And in this brook was an underground, almost a cave, where roots were above you. Then there was airspace, the water was below you. And I found incredible solace in that space. And it was the next closest thing I had to being literally underground. And what I noticed between around when I was 11 and 12 and able to go there more often on my own and dive down with a mask was there was a whole bunch of life underneath there that I knew nothing about and that very few people saw. That went into a lifelong love of hiking and climbing and mountains and being in nature and always wanting to find the darker places in nature. Thus, the second decade of my life was learning how to love where I lived and learning how to appreciate what was there. Thus, another light. Between 20 and 30, I loved a lot and I lost a lot. I ended up getting married. I finished my education up until my bachelor's degree. And I did things that were pretty dark sometimes. But whenever I felt that darkness, I was able to go back to the woods and I was able to go back to the mountains and find myself again. I went to the place that other people thought was dark and scary and horrible to find my peace. And I began to wonder if there was something really wrong with me. And then I realized, remember, this is the 70s before the big boom, like what we're seeing up here now in tourism. And I thought there was something wrong with me. But what I found was, as I came back from the dark places, by going to these other places, there was light. There was always light. I just had to remember that it was there. So for my third decade, I learned that no matter how bad things got, there would be light. My fourth decade, I got to raise an incredible son. And through his eyes, I saw nature and spirituality and a different kind of love, a love that I could not understand. And also during that time is when my own spirituality started to really blossom, and I was communicating more and more with ancestors as people passed or as I became aware of them. I had done that since I was a small child, but it was more intent. And what I learned was that I had a whole cadre behind me always. And so in my fourth decade, I learned that ancestors were pretty good to keep around. In my fifth decade, I had some troubles. There was a divorce. There was a couple of nasty relationships. I was in a very down time. And I needed to find a place where I was going to be comfortable in that dark, because I certainly couldn't get through each and every day without at least knowing how to manage it. And at that point is when I started becoming interested in chakra work and balance and understanding that at some points in your life, you're going to be dark. But with everything that I had learned before, I could come through it and I could make it through it. So in the fifth decade, I learned to be comfortable in the dark. My sixth decade, I got incredibly spiritual. As a very young teenager, in order to be confirmed in my church, I needed to study all 12 of the major religions. And what I learned about all of them is that they're really the same. They're really all the same. And the basis of it is that you take care of each other. You believe in something greater than yourself. No matter what you call your deity, there is a deity that you can either worship or speak to, or however you feel comfortable communicating. And I started to realize that I didn't know a lot about things like runes and tarot and that type of religion, because it is. A religion is a study of any theology. And I became interested in it. and realized that even though I had had some really, really dark spots, there was something I didn't know and something that maybe I could rely on in addition to what I already knew. So in my 6th decade, I opened my belief system to a new one. In my 7th decade, I moved to New Hampshire and I met Josh and Isaac. And they were kind of the catalyst for my growth and development since then. I learned that the underworld is not such a bad place all the time. That when you go there and you can take what you learn, and what you learn becomes the light when you come back out, as long as you send something else down there to take its place. Sometimes a sorrow can be that thing. You can take a rock and put it into the underworld, and that can transmit your sorrow. Sometimes it needs to be tangible. I have winter savory that I overwintered. That is a huge thing to me, to be able in zone 4 to keep a tropical herb alive. The peace in knowing that there is light no matter what. That out of the darkness, what is learned becomes the light, is what I have learned in this decade. So in my 7th decade, I feel more and more that I have been awakened. And that in a lot of ways, every single day can be an equinox in its own way. It can be an epiphany. It can be finally grasping the meaning of a tarot card that you've pulled 4 times, or a rune that keeps popping up. And all the darkness that enveloped you through all your life can come to a pinpoint where it all comes together. I feel incredibly fortunate to have been called a crone by a 5-year-old in a grocery store. That kind of nailed it for me. And I can only hope that the light that I've gained through my life from being in those dark places can always move forward. Happy spring, everyone.
Thank you, Marty. That's wonderful. A wonderful way to look at it, and to look at the journey from the underworld up, and then, working a little bit of cool magic too. So next up is me, and I'm taking it in an incredibly different direction because I wanted something whimsical and fun. So y'all are getting something whimsical and fun. Digging around trying to find a whimsical and fun fairy tale about spring is a little tricky. At least I was finding it to be tricky. So I kind of thought sideways, thinking about bees, thinking about how they're one of the signs that things are getting warmer. They're getting out, they're buzzing around, they're hitting up the early flowers. We'll be getting coltsfoot soon. We'll be getting crocuses and daffodils, and then all the other stuff. We have an invasive flower that takes over the front of our shop, and then we have another invasive flower that takes over that later on, and the bees love it. We have an apiary down the road. And so I decided I would tell this really interesting fairy tale about bees and fairies and how honey came around. So sit back and enjoy, hopefully. Once upon a time, because all best stories start that way, in a forest just a little down the road from here, there lived a fairy. Most of her neighbors had moved away to bigger forests that had larger, fancier trees, probably in Franconia Notch. But our fairy, for the story, had lived in her tree a very, very long time. In fact, so long had she been there that the top of her tree had fallen over when lightning struck it and lay just a short walk away. The fairy lived there so long that vines began to creep up the part of her tree that was still standing. Moss had settled in on the north side of the tree, and the fairy loved the way it made the remains of her trees look soft and fuzzy. She didn't mind that her tree wasn't fancy, as the ones the other fairies had moved into. Her neighbors were the birds and the bugs, the animals and the fish that lived in the tiny stream nearby. Just at the edge of the fairy's tiny woods, there was an open field. She liked the way the snow covered the ground in winter, how the daisies and the buttercups came and went into spring and summer, and how pretty her forest looked next to the dry and crunchy grass in autumn. She lived there peacefully for many, many years. Then, one day, one of the bees who normally worked in the field searching for food to feed their hive buzzed right where she should have, hummed left, and came to a screeching halt right outside of the fairy's door. Well, goodness gracious me, bumbled the bee. What a perfect, pretty place to live. This is way nicer than that old, rotten, dirty log my sisters and I share. Even though the top fell off the vines, even the top had fallen off the vines, had made the tree look alive. I have to go home and report to the queen that I found us a new home. The fairy overheard this and grew very frightened. She knew she could stand up to one bee, but a whole hive? All the other fairies were so far away that they couldn't help her. She had some magic, but hadn't had to use it for so very long that she wasn't sure she remembered very much, at least not enough that would be useful in protecting her house. All night long, she read and studied the few books she had, searching for a spell that would protect her beloved house. Finally, just as the sun was casting its first shadow, she found one. It wasn't a big spell, and it wasn't a hard spell. It wasn't the kind of spell that anyone might think to use for self-defense, but it was the best she could come up with. Smiling, she put the book away, dusted off her magic wand, giving it a few shakes to wake it up. And next, she sat down and waved the still sleepy wand, making several pairs of tiny gauze bags and stored them neatly by the front door. And only then did she set off to make herself a cup of dewdrop tea, as fairies do. The bees arrived at the field at precisely 8:27 a.m. Bees are always very precise about the correct time to begin work on any given day, and they always show up on time. Only this time, they didn't go to work on the flowers. Even though the daisies had opened overnight, they were especially beautiful that day, and it was looking glorious. Nor did the bees come by themselves. They had brought their queen, and she was quite the magnificent queen bee, twice the size of her worker daughters. She wore a crown of thistledown perched behind her antennae. Her wings were clear as glass and reflected rainbows in the morning light as she flew. Very troublesome was the long sword that she wore on her body. Most of us would call it a stinger, but the queen called it her sword, and I am not going to be the one to argue with the queen bee. As you probably know, most bees do have swords, but since the sword is part of their body, they will die if they use it to sting. Not so the queen bee. She could sting it again and again without taking any harm from it. That was also pretty upsetting to our fairy friend. Accompanying the queen as a guide was the little worker bee that had found the fairy's house the day before. They flew up to the fairy's little heart tree, and the queen began to look it over. She buzzed over the vines and hummed over the moss. She glanced at the ancient abandoned robin's nest that still huddled at the point where the tree had broken. Finally, she turned to her worker daughters and spoke. "All is just as our daughter has stated," she said. "This little tree shall be our new home. All of you go back to your log, gather your things, bring the new eggs from the egg storage room. Don't break or lose any. I don't want any of the baby bees to get hurt or lost." You see, losing baby bees was a terrible problem. They tend to crawl around on top of each other. Nobody could tell them apart. It was a mess. Since there was always a great many baby bees, it was hard to keep track of them or to keep them well fed. The worker daughters had a hard time remembering who had had their breakfast and who was still hungry. There were always more coming and growing up and becoming workers, and it was just an organizational mess. We will move this very day, the queen commanded, rather happy about the new home prospect. That was too much for the fairy. Suddenly angry, the fairy pulled her door open and flew out of her house on her own tiny wings. You can't come here, she cried. This is my tree. I live in it, and it has been mine, and I like it, and I'm not going to move. And the words just kept tumbling out. I just got new furniture. I have satellite TV now. I don't want to leave. This is a really nice log. You cannot make me leave. The queen looked at the fairy, who was smaller than the smallest of her own worker daughters. She was very small. Of course you will leave, because if you don't, I'm going to sting you with my sword. No, you won't, answered the fairy, trying to calm her down. I'll tell you what, if you leave my tree alone, I'll teach you a magic trick. The queen bee had one weakness. She loved magic. It frustrated her that she couldn't do any. Still, it really was a great tree, but I don't know, to do real magic? She thought and finally said, all right, I want to see this trick. If I show you, do you promise to leave my tree alone? If I like your trick, and if you can teach me how to do it, we'll have a deal. The fairy smiled, reached behind her door. Then, your majesty, will you please ask your worker daughters to each take a pair of these gauze bags and tie them to their back pair of legs? The queen was puzzled by this peculiar request, but gave the order, and very soon each worker daughter had a pretty tiny pair of gauze bags tied to her hind legs with dainty bows. Then she turned to the fairy. Now what happens? Have them all fly to the field and gather the dust off of each and every flower, the fairy replied. They can put the dust into the bags. The queen reared up on her back forelegs. I can't have them do that. The dust is useless. All it does is makes it sneeze when we're trying to get food for the baby bees and the rest of the hive. It will be all right, your majesty, said the fairy. I will put a spell on the bag so no one will feel sniffly or sneezy. So off the bees flew to gather the flower dust, while the fairy and the queen bee shared a pot of dewdrop tea and some fresh acorn muffins that the fairy had baked that very morning. The bees were not long after the sun had passed the highest point of the sky. Each worker daughter had her little bags bulging with yellow dust, but nobody was sneezing, nobody had watery eyes, and no sniffles. It was great. The fairy cleared a space on the ground and covered it with her very best golden platter. Everyone empty your bags here. One by one they obeyed, pouring the dust into a large, neat pile because the bees are very, very tidy. Taking her wand in hand, the fairy began chanting the spell. The queen and worker daughters all watched in wonder as the dust deepened in color and melted into a golden pool. The queen shook her royal head. This is indeed a nice trick. We don't need gold, we're bugs. It's not gold, your majesty. It's much, much better. Taste it. So the queen reached out one cautious forefoot and touched the golden pool. It's sticky, she cried. My daughters and I will get stuck and we'll all die. This upset the rest of the bees. The angry humming, it was starting to get a little dicey. Whoa, 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 said the fairy. You won't get stuck. Just taste the little bit you have on your foot. Gingerly, the queen brought the sticky substance up to her mandibles for a taste. Oh my, it's delicious. What do you call this? This is so wonderful. We can feed our baby bees with this and we'll never go hungry again. Oh, you can do so much more with this magic, said the fairy, and she waved the wand again. The golden puddle began to change once more, growing hard and taking the form of a long sheet, covered by the oddest six-sided compartments. Each compartment was the exact right size for a baby bee. This delighted the queen bee. Now, none of the baby bees would ever get lost again because each one would have their own little room to sleep and play and eat and grow. Leaning down, she listened carefully to the fairy's instruction how to make the golden liquid and how to turn it into this hard, waxy substance that made the baby bee bedrooms. The fairy had to stand outside a long time because each and every bee had to thank her personally. The queen came last. I declare you, fairy, as befriended. It is our most sincere promise that not only will we leave your house completely alone, but we will send drones to watch over it and keep it safe for you. Ah, thank you, your majesty, said the fairy gravely. And because you're a really good monarch, I have one more little surprise for you. So it's very lonely here in this little forest. Since all my friends have moved away, I'd like to have nice neighbors. You see, I live in the bottom part of this old tree. The top part is right over there. It's much bigger than my little bottom part, and no one's lived there for a long time. Maybe you could move all your family in and we can be neighbors just from now on. And that's just what they did. Now, every morning, the fairy rises to the music of humming bees as they beeline to the open field and the flowers that grow there. And sometimes, because royalty never goes and gathers pollen themselves, the queen comes over to the fairy's house where they sit and talk and sip their dewdrop tea while they spread freshly made honey on hot, newly baked acorn muffins. And that, my friends, is how the bees learned how to make honey and when they first moved into trees. And that is my story for you. So thank you for thank you for listening. And so from here, Josh will be next. And his plan, I believe, is to lead a guided meditation. For those of you who don't know Josh, he's my husband and co-owner of Deep Earth Arts. And he's also the resident psychic medium. And he's pretty fantastic. So I'm going to hand it off to him.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. Isaac, can you hear me well?
I can.
Awesome. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I want to thank Adi and Marty and Isaac, of course, for their wonderful stories. I have come to realize, I just turned 43 a couple weeks ago, and I've come to realize that the equinox, both spring and autumn, they happen to be my favorite time of year. And one of the reasons why is there's this balance that we're talking about. The summer solstice is the longest day, the winter solstice is the longest night. And both of those times of year, they're wonderful in their own way. I'm fascinated by this duality that we find ourselves in. I'm fascinated by this balance that we find ourselves in. And we're all made of these dualities. We all have a mind, we all have a heart, we all have this intellect, we all have an emotional side, an intuitive side. Like the temperance card in tarot, most of us have a foot in the physical world and most of us have a foot in the spiritual world. We have our own personal versions of day and night and solar and lunar energies within us. We have our own masculine and expansive, assertive energies within us. We have our own feminine and receptive, nurturing energies within us. We all do. So we find ourselves at this time of year right now, balanced between the darkness and the light. And it gives us an opportunity to take note of those dualities that exist within us, the intellect and the intuition, the physical and the spiritual, the masculine, the feminine, the solar, and the lunar. Over the past few months, I've experienced some of the hardest times of my life, truly. And I don't share that with you to garner sympathy or pity, because as I have exited my own personal underworld, if you will, I've appreciated the lessons that I've learned along the way. And I found our reality, our world, is this constant dance of night and day and expansion, restriction, chaos and order, life and death. We can't have just life, because if we did, every mosquito, every leech, every awful, nasty, nefarious life form that we believe is nasty would still be alive. And we can't have death, and only death, for obvious reasons, which means we can't just have peace, and we can't just have chaos, turmoil. We grow when we find ourselves in a place of struggle. And we can't struggle all the time, because we'll be worn down. And yet we can't know peace all the time, because we won't grow. So as our world, our reality has this constant dance between night and day and heat and cold, expansion and restriction, so don't we all personally have this dance between struggle and healing, growth and healing. I'm not getting into our meditation quite yet, because my son is on his way home, and as he comes home, the dogs will bark. So if he drags his little teenage butt getting home, you may hear dogs barking in the background. And for that, I may be able to mute myself, or I'll just ask you, if we're in the meditation, to make sure that you just stay there, okay? Now, when it comes to humans, when it comes to all of us, we are a constant balance between what we have in common and the differences that we have. No matter where we're at, no matter where we're from, no matter what sort of race or creed or ethnicity that we find ourselves, no matter what differences we all have similarities. We all have the same needs of love and shelter, companionship and community. We all have these. No matter where we're at, and no matter where our life is, we all have the day, we all have the night, and we all have the change of seasons. And we all have ancestors. We all have growth. We all have struggle. We all have peace, and we all have healing. These are our common grounds. We have these similarities no matter what our differences are. We have, all of us, our own personal underworlds. We have, all of us, our own personal summer fields, our own personal summer lands when everything is wonderful and we're on top of the world. And we all have those times when we are all at our lowest. So I've learned in all of the struggles that I've encountered over this past year and over my life, I don't wish for peace anymore. I don't wish to have a lack of struggle, because no matter how much I've struggled, I've always grown through it. And in my own way, I've always tried to see the opportunity in whatever crisis is presented to me. And I think most, if not all of us, can relate to that. I think most, if not all of us, can look back on the hard parts of our life, the burdens that we've carried. And with retrospect and with distance and time, we can see that we've grown through those. We've learned through those experiences. And sometimes, with enough retrospect and space, sometimes the worst things that have ever happened to us become the best things that have ever happened to us. Many of us here appreciate the idea of the phoenix, that mythological bird that dies every 500 years in a blaze of glory. And the next phoenix rises from the ashes, new and transformed. I know that we can all appreciate that archetype and that mythology. And I know that we all appreciate our own personal ability to become a phoenix, to rise again from whatever disaster we find ourselves walking through. To me, the most beautiful, beautiful aspect of our entire reality, our human existence, is the perseverance of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Some of the most wonderful parts of our creation have been created because of the adversity that we've faced. I see how our country came together in the face of 9/11. I see how our systems that have been out of balance for quite some time seem to be, with fits and jerks, seem to be finding a way to balance because of the COVID epidemic. There's always opportunity in the face of crisis. I no longer ask for peace. I no longer ask for a lack of chaos. I understand that as this reality requires that dance between darkness and light and heat and cold and night and day, so don't I. So don't we all. This growth and this healing and this growth and this healing. So I no longer ask for a lack of struggle. What I ask for is the strength to endure any struggle I face. Because struggle is inevitable. And struggle can sometimes be the most wonderful thing we find ourselves facing. And with that, I'd like to begin our journey, our meditation this evening. So what I would like everybody here to do is to find themselves in a comfortable, seated, laying position, someplace where they can only pay attention to the sound of my voice. And as we start our journey, and as we close our eyes, I'll take this moment to remind everyone that you are held and that you are safe. And no matter what struggles we may find in this journey to the underworld, no matter what we may discover about ourselves, you're held, you're safe. And when you come out on the other side, you will be transformed. Go ahead and close your eyes. And we're going to begin with what I call the fourfold breath. Some people know it as box breathing. Some of you have heard me offer this up before in other meditations. And this is a very useful tool at any time. If you find yourself stressed or in a place of anxiety, this is a wonderful tool, especially if you find yourself in a place of transition when you are, say, in your car from home to work or work to home. If you're about to walk into a place, even if it's Walmart or Target or any place that might wear on you, this is a very useful tool. And what this is this is a breathing technique where we breathe in for a count of 4. We're going to hold for a count of 4. We're going to exhale for a count of 4, and we're going to hold for a count of 4. Maybe you need to just breathe on a count of 3. All I ask is that you try to even out the inhalations and the exhalations. And here we are. So I'll begin. We'll inhale 2, 3, 4. We'll hold 2, 3, 4. We will exhale 2, 3, 4, and we will hold 2, 3, 4. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And finally hold. 2, 3, 4. And from here, just let your breathing return to a natural, easy rhythm that you don't have to pay attention to in any way. And as you're here, I want you to do your best to feel every part of your body relax. I'm going to take a quick inventory of your body starting at your feet. And as you bring your attention to your toes and your ankles and your feet, I want you to feel all parts, all muscles, all tensions leave your feet as if this warm bath water is crawling up your legs. And as you bring your attention up your feet and over your ankles, over your shins and your calves, I want you to feel all those parts of you relaxing. And I want you to feel here in this moment with us all as we create this community, as we celebrate this balance between light and dark. Feel the tension releasing from your body, moving over your hips and your thighs, coming up over your pelvis and your waist area. Feeling that warm, soothing, relaxing energy as all the tensions and the stresses leak out of you, leave you. Be here with us now as you relax in your abdominal area and in your lower back, your mid back, your sternum and your solar plexus, and in your chest. Feel any tightness in your shoulders and in your chest fade away like water down the drain. You are here with us now. No worries, no obligations, no stresses exist in this moment with us. You are safe and you are held. You feel the tension leave your shoulders, leave your arms, and you feel this warm, relaxing energy move down your elbows, through your forearms, and you feel all the tension in your wrists and in your hands, releasing and relaxing. You feel any stiffness in your neck disappear, and you feel this energy move up over your scalp and your head. And you feel all tension within your face, within your cheekbones, within your forehead and your temples. Relax, release. And in this moment, you are more relaxed and at ease than you can recall being in quite some time. And with your eyes closed and in your mind's eye, I would like you to see yourself in the room that you're in. Take a quick look around in your mind's eye and in your imagination of the furniture, any windows, and see yourself there, safe and held, content and relaxed. And anybody that may be passing away into sleepness, don't. Stay with us. Stay with us. Keep your mind active in this relaxed state and look at you, relaxed, sitting there. And what I'd like you to do is in your mind's eye, I want you to imagine yourself getting up and walking toward the nearest doorway in your room. And whether this doorway has an actual door in it or not, in your imagination, I want you to place in that doorway a green door. And you see a golden doorknob on this door. And you walk up to it, and I want you to be ready to walk through it, because on the other side of this door is not that room or that hallway or that dooryard. In reality, what lays on the other side of that doorway is not what lays on the other side of that doorway in your mind at this moment. Go ahead and grab the doorknob, and from there, open the door and step through. And as you do, you find yourself in the middle of a forest, middle of the woods, and you are in the most perfect summer day that you can imagine. You look around you, and you see trees and bushes, you see boulders, rocks. The temperature is perfect. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. You can feel a slight breeze playing across your skin. You can hear the sound of birds in the trees. You look up and you can see the blue sky and the sunlight shining through, breaking through the canopy of leaves over your head. You've never seen a more perfect day. And as you stand on the other side of this doorway, in front of you there is a path. From here, I'd like you to start walking down this path. No rush, no hurry, no stress, no obligations. If there was a paradise, this would be it. And you walk down this path at ease. You let your hands play along the bushes and the leaves that you see on the side of the path. And you keep walking and walking. And soon you hear the sound of a brook, a stream, up ahead of you. And as you look up ahead of you in the path, you see a small wooden bridge. It's arched, it's circular. You can see it go from one side of this small stream over to the other. And as you come up to this bridge, you see that it's handmade with sturdy, strong wood. And you take one foot and you step up onto this bridge, and you can feel the sturdy strength of the plank beneath your foot. And you set your hand upon the hand railing, and you can feel the rough wood that some craftsman long ago placed here to help people cross this stream. You can hear that gurgle and the bubble of the brook beneath you, and you can see the stones covered with moss and the small yellow spring flowers playing along the edge of the stream. And as you walk up over this small bridge, you get to the top where the bridge reaches its apex. And you pause for a moment. And from this higher vantage point, you just take a quick look around this forest. You breathe in the fresh air. And then you bend slightly over that hand railing and you look down into the brook. And you can see that small, clear pool of water. And from there, you can see a reflection. And you can see the leaves and the blue sky highlighting you, framing your face. And you see that you're here, stuck between water and land. And you give yourself a smile. Take a deep breath. And you stand up straight and you walk over to the other side. And as you continue down the path, you feel a shift in the air. Something's changing. And there's a sense of anticipation. You feel excited. You keep walking down this path, and as you walk, you can sense and see a clearing. And as you move closer to this clearing, you can see the trees opening up into a ring, almost perfectly circular, of trees in the middle of this forest. And as you look into the center of this clearing, you see what looks like a boulder. But it's larger than any boulder that you've ever seen, and it appears almost as if the top of a tiny little mountain sticks out of the ground in the middle of this forest. And in the center of this boulder, of this gigantic rock, you see a simple wooden red door. And this red door also has a golden doorknob, and you walk up to it. And you get a sense of excitement here. You don't know what's on the other side, but you're excited. You feel something calling to you on the other side, something that you feel like you have felt before, a place that you have been before. And I want you to take your hand and I want you to put it on this golden knob. You open the door, and as you do, you feel the cool subterranean air of a cave play across your skin. And as you look into this door, you can see the inside lined with rock and torches. Torches lining the wall of this high ceiling, these broad walls, a simple gravel floor. And while some of us may be afraid of the darkness, some of us may be afraid of going underground, you feel no fear here, for you are safe and you are held. And whatever is down this corridor lends you a sense of not only excitement, but love. And with your excitement, you begin to walk down this path that's in this corridor, the flicker of the torches on the side of the wall illuminating your way. You're never completely in darkness. But you can feel the path and the incline start to move down, ever so slightly. And the more you walk, the further down you go, held, supported, and illuminated the entire way. You continue to move down this corridor, and soon in the distance, you can hear the sound of people. Quite a few people. Sound of laughter, almost like the sound of a cafeteria. A lot of people. You can hear the sound of dishes clanking. Every once in a while, you can hear the sharp cry of laughter of a woman, the deep, throaty laugh of a man. And soon you can hear the sound of music playing. An upbeat drum music playing, the sound of laughter, the sound of revelry, the sound of happiness, and the sound of family. And you move closer and closer to this sound. And as you move closer and closer to this sound, the darkness starts to get brighter and brighter. then you come upon an opening. And as you walk through this opening, you walk into a gigantic cavern with ceilings so high you can't see them. And as you step through this door, you can see long tables and benches. All of your ancestors here, all of your grandmothers and your grandfathers, your aunts and your uncles, all of these people that have come before you here in this hall of ancestors. And they're here. They expect you. And as you step through that corridor and over the threshold and into this hall of ancestors, as if they were expecting you, you turn and you see them, and they turn and they see you. And it's as if they've known you forever. That feeling of family and community, so overwhelming, so rich, so deep, you've never felt it before. And you can smell all the food, all the drink that everyone here is sharing. And in the very center of this hall is a great fire, a huge bonfire raging, one that never, ever runs out and never goes out. And it warms everyone here, and it provides enough light for everyone to see. And you feel called to this fire. And although you might want to stop and speak to every passerby and every face that you see, you get closer and closer to this fire, called to the center. And as you get closer to this bonfire, in the center of this great hall and in the center of these great tables, I want you to see this giant throne carved out of stone, a high seat. And in this high seat, as you walk up to it, sits a woman. She is old, wrinkled skin, gray hair, but the love of 1,000 lives lived lives on in her eyes. And as you walk up to her and you see her face and you feel her presence, you feel a love, a connection, and a home that you have never felt before. She smiles at you, but she says no words. The communication that she has to offer you moves not from voice to ear, but from heart to heart. And in this moment, on your shoulders, you finally feel the layers of clothing that are on you. And it feels like you're wearing 20 shirts, overshirts, coats, jackets. Up until this point, until you have met this woman, you had no idea of the weight and the burdens that you've been carrying. These weights, these burdens, these pains and these traumas, while unnecessary, while unfortunate and tragic, have taught you as you've carried them. But here, in the presence of all your ancestors, in the presence of this great grandmother. Here, you can leave your burdens behind. Every problem, every trouble will be left here. And this woman, this grandmother, with all her love, simply lifts a hand and tilts it towards you, as if saying, please, do it. And from there, you peel off one layer, then you let it drop to the floor of this grand cavern. You peel off another layer. You peel off another memory. You peel off another sadness, and you feel them fall to the floor around you. They are at your feet. And you unbutton, and you unzip, and you free yourself from these pains and these memories that no longer serve. They have taught you along the way, but they are no longer your friend. You unzip, you unbutton, and you feel a weight fall from your shoulders, one that you've carried for so long you forgot how heavy it was. And as you let these layers fall away more and more, the love and the happiness fills this grandmother's face until her smile could not become any larger. Her cheekbones dancing up into her eyes. And as you free yourself from these layers, you let the last one go. And here, in her excitement, this woman claps and laughs. She's so excited that you have visited her to take away all your burdens and all your pains. And in that moment, in an agility that defies whatever age she may represent, she springs from the high seat, steps down from it, and bounces over to you. She gives you a hug and she wraps you in her arms. And you can smell a faint scent of cinnamon and sandalwood, a faint smell of earth and dirt. And you feel a love radiate from her chest like the sun itself. And she holds you. And she loves you. And she lets you go. And she holds you at arm's length, holding onto your shoulders, smiling and loving you. And then she lets you go completely. And she bends over and she grabs up all of your layers, all of your shirts, all of your coats, all of those memories and those pains. And she tosses them into this grand bonfire in the center of this grand hall of ancestors. And here, with those burdens gone from your shoulders, you feel freer and lighter than you felt in ages, perhaps in any recent memory. And now, for the first time, you feel like dancing. You can hear the music around you. And with those layers and those coats and those shirts and those memories and those pains all gone, burned to ash, taken by the fire, taken by your ancestors, this grandmother takes your hand and twirls you around. And for a moment, you dance with her, and you laugh with her, you love with her, And in that moment, you feel her pride. She's proud of you in the way that you have carried those burdens and all of those memories and all of those pains. And she invites you to set them down here forever. Let them burn to ash, let them go forever, and walk away. They no longer serve. She invites you and gives you permission to walk away from them, to absolve yourself of all the guilt, the shame, the fear, the worry, the anxiety that you may feel in your present day. And you laugh free. You laugh from your belly like you've never laughed before. And in that moment, you feel the tears of release streaming down your eyes. But now is not the time for tears. She reaches up and she wipes them away. Now is the time for love. And as you look around, as you see all of the faces of the men and the women, the young and the old, the tall, the short, the thin, the husky, all of these ancestors that have come before you are here in this moment to support you, to love you, to hold you. They have always been with you, and they will always be with you. And now lighter, freer, this grandmother from heart to heart, from her heart to your heart, invites you, whenever you need to visit them once again. Whenever you feel overburdened, overstressed, whenever you feel anxiety and worry, pain or shame, visit your ancestors, visit this great grandmother. This fire burns forever, and this fire will gladly burn all of those pains, all of those burdens that you'll inevitably pick up along the way. Life isn't easy, but that's okay, because you are strong. Up to this moment, up to this time with your ancestors, you have survived 100% of your bad days. The very worst experiences that you have ever been through, you stand here, a survivor, a descendant, a loved one, family to be proud of. The strength of these ancestors courses through your veins, lives on inside of you. You are here because the people that brought you here were strong. Their strength has always been in you. Their strength will always be in you. This grandmother gives you one quick hug, because it's not goodbye. It's a see you later. She gives you a squeeze and lets you go. And from here, you turn around and you walk back through the crowd. You feel this love, but you're not leaving it behind. you're taking it with you. And as you walk through the crowd, you can feel your family, your ancestors, pat you on the back, squeeze your shoulder, give you gestures of love, attention, to let you know they'll always be with you. And from where they are, they will watch you live your life and they will cheer you on every moment of every day until you join them as an ancestor. You walk up to the door through which you walked, you step over the threshold and back into the gravelly corridor lit by those flickering torches. As you begin to ascend ever so slightly up that path. And as you walk up that corridor, you feel the lightest that you have ever felt. You have learned from your pains, you have learned from your traumas. You are wiser and stronger for all of them. But here and now, you leave them behind you. And as you make your way up this incline and towards this door, the door on this side is not red, it's green. And it still has this golden doorknob. You've seen this green door before. And as you walk up to it and you grab that golden doorknob, as you twist it, as you open it, you can feel the warmth of the room right now in which you sit. Here, you walk into this room, the room in which you sit now, and you sit or lay back down into your physical body, lighter and freer of your burdens than you've been ever. You've left your pains behind you, and in its place, you've taken the love of your ancestors, the love of the family that will always be with you. And here, I would slowly have you bring awareness back to your body. Start at the top of your head, bring awareness to the very top of your scalp, and slowly feel the awareness move back in to your head and your face. Come back with us, be here now. Feel that awareness move down your neck and into your shoulders. Bring attention to your breathing and feel how wonderful it is to be alive, to take those deep breaths of oxygen-rich air, the very air that sustains you. Feel it lift your chest, feel it animate your body, feel the beat of your heart, and feel the blood that flows and pulses within your veins, the blood of your ancestors, the blood of your grandmothers, the blood of your grandfathers, here and now, flowing through you, strengthening you, reminding you they will always be with you. Feel that awareness in your abdomen. Feel the rise and fall of your belly. Feel your lower back. Feel your waist and your pelvis. Bring your attention down to your thighs and your legs. Your attention down into your knees and into your shins and into your calves. Feel your ankles and your feet, and slowly wiggle ever so slightly your fingers and toes, those parts of you that connect you to the air, connect you to the earth, connect you to this world. Feel your heart beat. Feel new, feel born again. You have been to the underworld. You have been through the winter of your soul, and you are stronger now because of it. Feel the warm energy of spring flowing beneath your feet as the earth itself comes back to life, as the earth itself rejoices in growing again. Feel rejuvenated, feel stronger, more confident, and more sure of yourself and your place in this world, the role that you play, and the love that you have. Feel all of this more deeply now than you have ever felt before. You have been through the underworld, and you have been reborn. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to Isaac.
Thank you, Josh, for that absolutely wonderful guided meditation. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've been trying to make room to have more events like this, either virtual or in person, trying to celebrate the equinoxes and solstices and the holidays in between. So thank you for being part of that. And thank you for being part of this little community, getting together with us so we could celebrate the turning of the wheel and getting that much closer to spring. And with that, I want to thank everybody who's told stories today. Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Josh, for the wonderful guided meditation. And have a great equinox, everybody. And have a good night. See y'all later.